Hey guys, on to video number 2 for the day here, but my another topic that came up that's actually very relevant since Apple just announced some of their new products today is smartwatches or wearable devices. This was something that was actually very popular a couple of years ago, and is actually really cool with G as one of the internships I had. I got to work with Google Glass, and it was really awesome to use Google Glass as kind of really the onset of AR and how you could leverage that. But during that time, it was actually very popular to be looking at ways that you could use Android Wear to actually get notifications in the enterprise. So maybe I'm working on, in this case, a jet engine. What if I had the instructions for putting together this engine on my wrist? So instead of having to go back and glance at a TV, one for Google Glass, it'd be right in front of your eye. Other example would be, oh, let's just look at my wrist and see what the next steps are. So it kind of made sense at the time. But honestly, since 2014, 2015, you really haven't heard too much in the in the space of Android Wear. Of course, Apple Watch has been very popular and is essentially putting Fitbit out of business. Their stock actually just took a huge plummet after the Apple Watch was announced, and rightly so. Why get a Fitbit when you can now get a Series 1 or 2 Apple Watch for slightly more money and get a lot more features out of it? It just makes a lot more sense. Um, but kind of digging into this, why is the Apple Watch so much better? My previous article talked about, what are the different chip designs that get to power these mobile applications, and it boils down to Apple has the more advanced chip design. Because they can ship more Apple Watches than anybody else, they can be in power of what their design is and how it's manufactured. Whereas, say, a Motorola, a Fossil, a Skagen, any of these companies, they just don't ship enough of these watches to justify building their own chip. So they have to rely on somebody else to do that for them. In this case, it's Qualcomm. So apparently, smartwatches haven't been enough demand at all for even Qualcomm to focus on it because it has now been 3 years and we're just now getting a new chip that was announced by them for these new devices. Um, so again, why have Apple Watches kind of stood out? For one, they can get more than a day of battery life. That's something Android watches haven't been able to say, and that is hands down the biggest complaint from consumers. And I know myself, having tried out a couple of these watches, I don't want to bring around a different charging dock if I'm going on vacation to keep charging my smartwatch, even if I have enjoyed wanting to have the notifications. It's just been too much of a hassle. So kind of digging into it, what is this Wear 3100? I guess even to back up, the Wear 2100, and even before that was the Snapdragon 400. Both of those chips were essentially just uh, mobile phone chips, low end, that were very kind of power sipping devices, but they were still built for a smartphone that would have a 2000 milliamp battery, not a 300 milliamp battery that would need to be constantly getting glanced at all the time. Uh, if you think about it, it's no wonder that they had poor battery life. And really, the 2100 was just a rebrand of the Snapdragon 400, just to kind of keep excitement out there. But I think anybody who could look at the technical details kind of realize it's still the same thing. Qualcomm just didn't want to put resources towards it, and probably because, again, the demand was never there. Um, so really, what are you looking at in improvements here? Well, they finally shrunk the die size of the chip. To me, it's kind of alarming. Qualcomm didn't say what fabrication size that they were going to, but when you look at the old design, it was 28 nanometers, which was actually, again, 4 or 5 years old in the mobile space, especially for a small power sipping device. That's terrible. Why didn't they go to something smaller? Well, the 3100, it looks like my guess would be based on the 14 nanometer processing node. Apple didn't confirm it with their S4 chip. My guess, though, is that Apple would be using Samsung's 10 nanometer platform. But if they were able to secure 7 nanometer for those chips, you're looking at even better performance and why they're able to provide that. And looking at the 3100, I don't quite see anything that jumps out to me in terms of really being true um, competitor to Apple's S4 chip, mainly because it's still using a quad-core kind of smartphone setup, and that's likely to be powering what Wear OS would be running on. So those chips would be used to actually store the OS for the storage, and then how the actual chips would be utilized. And again, it's just easier for Qualcomm to recycle what they already have out there for phones. What is the standout though is what they're calling, what is it here, the QCC 1110 kind of coprocessor. To me, this is showing the early stage of what Qualcomm's trying to develop long term. They mentioned that it could stand alone, but it's not yet. They're mentioning for audio reasons and other areas. To me, it's showing that it's just very early in the development cycle. Um, Give it another 2, 3 years. I think this will be the chip that will truly compete against Apple's S line of watch processors. And the benefits there is that it's truly built for smartwatches. Still, this is just a coprocessor, so it's still having to rely on these phone processors, but they're going to offload a lot of tasks like, say, event management. Over Bluetooth, if your phone says, hey, a new notification's coming live, instead of turning on that power or that phone processor, it'll just use this coprocessor. And that's really why you're able to see a lot of these battery life improvements, because it's going to be better optimized. Now, another area where they're showing is kind of the voltage management, which, again, this is just general kind of processor improvements, but the area is kind of, they're calling it traditional watch mode, but they're only going to activate essentially the GPU to display something back to the smartwatch, which is great because if you just want to be able to glance at your watch and kind of turn off the extra features, now you could eke out maybe an extra week of battery life, whereas before it'd still be maybe another day if you activated that mode. So that's absolutely critical, and that I would say hands down, product manager talking here, that would be the #1 feature to hit, and I think they definitely did that, which should be very encouraging. Um, but it's still going to be up to how smartwatch manufacturers kind of produce that. Again, product manager speaking here, I would hope someone's technical enough to know you want an OLED display, so you're only activating the pixels on the device that you actually need to be using. So that should help stretch battery life out even further. But we'll kind of see what happens. Now, at least manufacturers have a better chip to be toying with to get us better devices. Hopefully that means more adoption, and hopefully that means increased sales for Qualcomm, so these chips get accelerated even further. But really, what does this mean for consumers? Again, better devices. It's a smaller chip. Instead of, if you have a GPS on your wrist, maybe it's a Garmin watch. Now that should be significantly smaller watch. So for fitness applications that aren't an Apple Watch, they just should get overall much nicer to use. Additionally there, I think with Google's approach to Wear OS, you're going to start seeing some expanded features that take advantage of the coprocessor, so battery life can continue to get even better now that there's this building block. Additionally, what I'm excited for is essentially what would be the Pixel Watch. I'd previously tested out an LG Sport Watch, which was kind of the Nexus test bed for Google, and I was pretty impressed with how fluid it was and how efficient it was. The problem there was just the design was too bulky for what I was looking for, and still didn't fix the big problem of battery life and having to lug around additional charger. But hopefully with Google announcing their own watch, because they make the software and they'd be in charge of the hardware now, it should be the best user experience really available for someone on a smartwatch outside of what Apple's providing. So that should be pretty interesting to watch. If that does get announced, I'm sure I'll get it within the following weeks, and I'll try and do a review. But it's kind of my overview of the smartwatch market. Still a very small market. I don't see it being even billions of dollars, even for Apple. So It's still very much a niche market, but you're going to start seeing this take away companies like, Pebble's already been absorbed. Fitbit, I definitely see Fitbit either getting bought out or they're going to start liquidating. I don't see how they can really stay in this market with Apple really consuming it, and now these other traditional smart or watchmakers being able to have their own smartwatches. It just doesn't make sense. So, just something to be on the lookout for. But hope you enjoyed this. Give a comment or something and expand on anything. See ya.